what BBMRI-ERIC is, it's a European research infrastructure for biobanking and biomolecular resources with 21 member states at the moment. And we are connecting more than 600 biobanks. You will see it later. And one of our main missions is to facilitate access to quality-defined biological material and data, and to support ethically compliant access for medical research purposes. So the negotiator is one of the tools in a chain of tools that actually implement this access pipeline. And I will be talking, of course, about the whole chain of the tools because it only makes sense to look at it as a whole, but with, of course, particular attention on the negotiator. The purpose of the negotiator is to enable effective communication access with many biobanks at the same time. And the rationale behind it is you can pre-identify many candidate biobanks easily in the directory. But then it's not realistic if you end up with 100 biobanks and potentially several hundred matching collections that you call each biobank individually and figure out availability. So this is where the negotiator steps in. We have some history of this tool. It has been initially released in 2018, and there was a continuous development of it in the subsequent years. But now we have released version 2.0 at the end of August, which is really a major overhaul of the functionality of the negotiator, and you will again see how it works in practice. So I would like to introduce a little bit of terminology before we start with the actual access procedures so that you are aware. The notion, we need to have the notion of biobank and collections. This is used throughout the whole negotiator and also throughout the directory interfacing the negotiator. The biobank is basically the hosting institution. It is the legal entity, the juridical person, so-called, that is hosting the collections of biological material and data. And these biobanks can provide some services on top of just hosting the collections and providing access. And the collection is the second entity. This is where the biological material and or data is actually stored. There is quite large divergence of those collections, ranging from institutionalized collections within single biobank that have your own PIs to just very virtual collections that are used to describe what material and what data is available in the biobanks. The collections can form hierarchies, so you can have sub-collections, sub-collections, and recently with the COVID-19, we have also introduced the ability to collect biological material prospectively using these collections. So for all the biobanks that are somehow participating in the COVID activities, there are, if they're able to collect biological material prospectively, they have also a prospective collection, an empty collection that basically indicates ability of the biobank to collect material and or data prospectively. I'll be talking about findability services. These are the services that you're using for finding the candidate biobanks, those that you might be interested in working with. And we have quite a few of those in our ecosystem. Then you issue a query to those findability services and you get a list of the candidate biobanks back. So with this list of candidate biobanks or collections, you're going into the negotiator and initiate the negotiation. The request is the entity that is filed in the negotiator by the requester. So this is what you are probably going to do as biomedical researchers. And we have collection representatives. Those are the people from the biobank side who are representing biobanks and their collections. The whole access procedure of BBMRI looks as follows. You start with the discovery phase. This is the famous BBMRI Directory or the LOCATOR tools, where you identify what biobanks might be of your interest and what collections inside those biobanks. Then the next step, you negotiate if those samples data are actually available and if they're available for the given purpose that you are specifying. This is still done on the level of BBMRI-ERIC, but with already interfacing to the individual biobanks. The next step is you are signing an MTA or DTA, material transfer agreement or data transfer agreement, because you're typically getting personal data, pseudonymous data, data that has been assigned pseudonyms instead of the original identifiers, but you're typically not given anonymized data, and I'll explain why, or well, we can theoretically as well, or even practically, but it's actually discouraged for real fundamental reasons. So you need to get the data and the material under a contract. Then in the next step, you should get the samples and the data. And in the last step, as you finish your research project with the data and material, you should tell us that you have finished the project, and if there is any data generated from that research project, it should be offered to the biobank to enrich their existing data resources. Of course, there can be some embargo period, all those things are supported, but this is just the last step to help build and further enrich the existing ecosystem that can serve user needs. Why do we have two different colors here? The blue ones are the boxes that are done on the level of BBMRI-ERIC, while the gray one is something that is done purely on the level of the local biobanks. So we as BBMRI-ERIC, we don't interfere in the MTA DTA signing process. We don't interfere with the delivery of the samples or the data. But we provide the findability services, we provide the negotiation platform, and of course, at the end, we should be notified that the research project is over. And if the biobank does not have capacity or expertise to host the return data, we can offer help here and host it somewhere else than in that biobank. So as I've already mentioned, there are a number of tools on the level of whole BBMRI-ERIC. So the directory and the locator are the discovery tools. We have also a self-assessment system for biobanks to declare the quality compliance of their biological material, and the data about the quality of the material is propagated into the directory. We have the negotiator, which is the main topic of today's talk, but not only that, it's governed by the BBMRI-ERIC access policy. And our LC unit is providing ethics check feature, which is not an ethics approval, but they can guide you through the ethics process and help you with sorting out the questions that you might have there. So how does the access procedure look like? You typically start with the directory, the locator, or other services in the findability realm, where you identify the biobanks that might have data or samples relevant for you. In a way, this process provides an upper bound on the available biobanks. So it should exclude those biobanks that for sure do not have anything relevant for you. But it does not give you a guarantee that there is a right combination of what you're searching for in there still, especially when you're working with the directory, which works on the level of aggregate data. And namely, the material or the data might not be available for a particular purpose, because when you're browsing or searching in the directory or in the locator, you're not declaring any intent how the material is supposed to be used. While the biobank typically has the material and the data with some informed consent, and this provides also a bound on for what purposes the data and the material can be used. At some point, you will need to authenticate yourself. This is because you are, if you're dealing even with anonymized data in the locator, it still works on the level of individual data internally. So we need to minimize the residual risk and have safeguards even for dealing with anonymized data. And in the negotiator, when you're negotiating with the biobanks, you need to be known to the biobanks. You need to have a well-defined identity so that the biobanks can trust you and you can trust the biobanks. So the authentication is there for that, for building that mutual trust. When you start filing the request in the negotiator, this is the moment where you have to be authenticated, as I've mentioned on the previous slide, but also you need to declare the purpose. So this is the point where the biobanks can match their informed consent or their other limitations of scope they can serve with the purpose that the researcher is indicating. Plus, for the depletable resources, which is the case for the biological material, while it's not the case for the data, so for the depletable material, the biobanks may also decide how to prioritize distribution of the material. So they may prioritize one research project over the other, and that's their internal independence that they have within BBMRI. They should do it, of course, on sound and ethically acceptable basis. So it's not that I'm giving the samples only to my friends, but there might be reasons based on scientific excellence where they prioritize one project over the other. You can also negotiate when you're accessing the data. You can also negotiate other locally available services, such as help with interpretation of the data, because you might not have the expertise how to interpret the data in some local encodings. And one word of caution here, we have seen quite a few requests that are heavily underspecified. This is typically, give me all the COVID data that you have. That is typically something that does not work. You need to specify what data you need for what purpose you need, because even when somebody is giving you the data out, you're responsible for so-called data minimization principle under GDPR, which is you should only get the data that you need for a particular purpose, and you're not getting all the data that is in the biobank. Not to say that many biobanks live in the environment of clinical settings, like they're part of a hospital, institutionalized or not as a biobank. So they have some faster or slower interface to the hospital information system. And you can spend quite a lot of time as a biobank on getting the data out of the hospital information system. So again, it makes sense to request specific data for a specific purpose, and the biobank can check if they can get the data, and if they can also do data harmonization to the formats or to the standards that you're requesting on your end as a requester, or if they somehow need to help you with the interpretation of the data. By the way, if there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand or post them in the chat. I guess Laura will notify us if there is anything, and I can respond to those immediately. I mean, we can discuss those things on the go if you have some burning questions. Now, the comment I promised earlier about pseudonymized and anonymized data. Through BBMRI-ERIC, you can get technically access to both pseudonymized as well as anonymized data. However, and that was the statement I made earlier in the presentation, the pseudonymization should be preferred for medical research. Pseudonymization means coding of the data so that the direct identifiers of the donors are or data subjects, to be formally correct under GDPR, are replaced with those pseudonyms. So you won't find civic numbers or social insurance IDs or addresses of the people. But that's about it. And you're left still with personal data. You don't do any other data protection mechanisms on top of it. So the big advantage of the pseudonymized data is it maximizes the data quality and also data traceability, in the sense that if there is any doubt about the data quality, for instance, you can get back to the biobank and ask them, guys, we have some suspicion here. Could you please investigate in the hospital information system if the data is really correct? Or if you get any incidental findings, you can, or not you, but you can notify the biobank, and the biobank can get back to the clinical settings and handle the incidental findings according to their policy. Similarly, if there is any suspicion from the funder's side that the data has been counterfeit or something, for pseudonymized data, you have perfect proof on the data you work with. While anonymization means basically controlled destruction of the data in order to protect privacy of the participating individuals, the data subjects. The only reason where it makes sense to use anonymized data, from my perspective, is when you do not have legal basis to do the data processing. So, for instance, if you have a research purpose that is not compatible with what the consent is for, but they still have as a part of the consent that they can provide anonymized data for other purposes, as a biobank, for instance. So anonymized data in principle should be handled with big care, because it has been noisified, it has been partially masked, it has been mangled, it can be shuffled, it can be differently generalized, so that you don't have the level of trust in the data that you have for pseudonymized data. And furthermore, you still need to sign some agreement typically, because even when you do anonymization, there is always some residual risk if the resulting data is supposed to be at least partially useful for any purpose. So the only perfectly anonymized data is basically noise or garbage. So otherwise, if you want to retain some utility of the data, there is always some residual risk, and the biobank typically needs to contractually handle this residual risk by telling you that you will not try to re-identify people or attack the privacy technologies, privacy enhancing technologies that were used as a part of anonymization process. So now getting to the request part. How the request actually flows through BBMRI-ERIC. So in the first step, the researcher identifies candidate biobanks. As we have already said, this can be done in the LOCATOR directory or other services. Then the researcher files the request. And here the semantics of the blue color is slightly different to the previous slide. The blue one means what is handled within BBMRI-ERIC Negotiator. So as the researcher files the request, this is already done in the negotiator. It is sent to BBMRI-ERIC for basic check. This basic check is it has nothing to do with scientific quality. It is just an administrative check if the request is not violating access conditions or access policy of BBMRI-ERIC, because we have sometimes seen the negotiator to be kind of abused by some people, for instance, to distribute questionnaires to the biobanks. So we have this initial basic sanity check, and then the biobanks are notified about the request. So the representatives of the collections inside the biobanks will check if they have the material available for the given, or the data available for the given purpose. And once they have, they inform the researcher, the requester, we have the material available for the particular purpose and we can give it out, or the data. By the way, bear in mind, BBMRI is not just the sample provider, it's mainly the data provider. And yes, the samples come on top. We have the data and the material, and it's not available for a particular purpose, or we don't have it at all, the right combination of the material and the data, or we don't have it, but we can collect it, do it prospectively. And this is basically, or we don't have anything. So this is basically what the researcher gets for each of the participating biobanks. The researcher selects with which biobanks they want to continue. And then the biobank gives them typically an MTA, DTA template, they negotiate, sign. We're tracking delivery. So the biobanks indicate if they have shipped the samples and the data, and the researcher indicates that they have received the data and the samples, so that we just have an overview if the service has been provided actually by the biobank. And then the researcher goes for the research project, implements it, and once it's over, it's the notification time for the researcher to notify BBMRI-ERIC and the biobank that project has ended, and if there are any data available as a result. This is a diagram that shows it from a different perspective. So here on the x-axis, the horizontal axis, you have different entities. So on the left, you have the requester, you have the directory, the negotiator, BBMRI, access manager, and the biobank representatives. And on the vertical axis, you have time. So the requester files a request. The request starts from the findability service like the directory into the negotiator. Then the access manager checks the request. The request then is sent to all the biobanks, candidate biobanks that have been identified. Some biobanks may say, well, we're not interested, we don't have the right combination. Some of them might say, well, yes, but we need to know more about the request. So there is a request refining period. And eventually, after the user, the requester refines it, the biobank should indicate, all the biobanks should indicate we do have, we don't have material and data for a particular purpose. A quick note on authentication and authorization, and we are aware as BBMRI that this is sometimes one of the hurdles for the users, so we're committed to simplify it as much as we can over the time. The idea behind the authentication is once you log in for the first time into the negotiator, you will have an identity that is also usable in all other BBMRI-ERIC services. So you would use the same procedure if you want to log in into the directory to get advanced functionality out of it, if you want to get more detailed information from the locator, if you're filing requests into the negotiator, and so forth. So the simplest way how to register is you go to the negotiator, BBMRI-ERIC.eu, click the login register button. This is here. Can you see my cursor moving, Laura? Laura?
Yes, we see.
Perfect. And here on the next, you are taken to this type of a screen where if you have been previously logged in, you can see your previous home institution, or you can type in here the name of your institution or acronym of your institution to check if your institution is available and you can log in through your home institution, so that we as BBMRI would not need to register you. We would just get information about your identity from your university, hospital, research institute, whatever. You can also log in with ORCID. I hope that most of you as researchers are aware of what ORCID is. Or as a method of last resort, you can register an account in something called Life Science Hostel. This is basically a very simple authentication method that uses just your email address. You need to confirm ownership of that email address, and you're done. The downside of this method is that we don't have much information about you, honestly, because anybody can register any Gmail account. So myself, I can also register an account of Laura Ansona if I want, BBMRI probably with some numbers at the end, and use this counterfeit identity to register elsewhere. So that's why we use it only as a last resort if you can't log in through your home institution, if you can't log in through ORCID ID. So if you end up here, you can log in or you can sign up. This is the button on the bottom here. Or if you've forgotten the password, there is a procedure. So when you're registering, I'm mentioning it because this part sometimes confuses users. So if you're registering to the Life Science Hostel, As a first step, you provide your email address and your name, and you will get a confirmation email. And there is a link in it on which you need to click. And once you click, your registration within the life science hostel is confirmed. Then you need to go back to the negotiator, hit the login register button again, click on logging in through the life science hostel, log in using this confirmed identity, and then finish the registration procedure. This is a nuisance that is introduced because we need to verify that your email address is actually valid. So that's why the whole flow of registration is somewhat interrupted here. So when you're filing a request, there are two possible ways how you can do it. A, you start in the negotiator itself, or you start directly in one of those findability services, like you're browsing or searching in a directory, and you go from the directory into the negotiator. This is the first way. When you start in the negotiator, you can pick any of findability services that are integrated with the negotiator. So currently we have BBMRI-ERIC Directory, German National Directory, the Sample and Data Locator, and RD Connect Finder. So quick introduction to all of those services, because it's important for you to know what you can get out of those. BBMRI-ERIC Directory is probably the most well-known service from BBMRI-ERIC side. It works on aggregated data. So there is information on the collection level, like what the collection contains in terms of what diagnoses are available, what material types are available, what data use conditions or sample use conditions are in place. But you don't have detailed information about the combinations of those. Yes, there is cancer diagnosis, there is CA material available, for all frozen material, 18 diagnosis for using the aggregate service. But because you have very effective means to negotiate with many biobanks at the same time in the negotiator, it's not such a big burden. And as I mentioned in the introduction of the presentation, it provides you with upper bound of the biobanks that might have something relevant for you. The data for BBMRI-ERIC Directory is available centrally. There are two user interfaces to it. Simple one, which most users are using, and there is advanced one, which is available after you log in into the directory. And this allows you to do in-depth querying of any data that is in the directory, while the simple one is using only the most often requested search fields. So this is the user interface that you have probably seen, or many of you have probably seen in the past. There is a sign-in button that is overlaid by the map on the right side. And here on the left side, you have the facets, the search facets that you can use. And here in the middle, there is the big window with the list of matching collections and biobanks. What you can search for in that simple UI is COVID-specific services. This is the recent development of the last couple of months, where we wanted to distinguish biobanks that are working on COVID-related stuff. Available diagnoses, material types, countries, quality marks, both on the institution level and collection level. So if the biobanks have on the institution level, they can have 15,189 certification for medical laboratories, for instance, while on the collection level, they indicate compliance of the material to the new ISO norms, for instance. Networks, so in which biobank and collection networks they are participating, and what data types are available. for instance, clinical data, phenotype data, so forth. This is how the search looks like. So here I'm using the case I've given earlier. So somebody searching for C18, C19, and C20. These are colorectal cancer diagnoses. And you will see that you're getting 47 biobanks, that is organizations, with more than 100 matching collections. In the advanced UI, this is available after you do the login procedure. You can browse or search through the biobanks, through the collections, or through the networks, or through everything in very detailed manner. So you can hit the wizard button here and you can specify any parameters. So that, for instance, here I have taken the wizard screen for the donor data. So you can filter based on the sex of the biological sex of the participant, of the donor patient, or diagnosis available, age ranges, in what units are those ages available, and so forth. So this is the directory part. Once you have identified the biobanks, you hit the request access, request sample button, and you go into the negotiator and file your request. Similar for the locator, this is a federated search tool, so it is different from the directory substantially, that it works on patient level and sample level data, but at the end you get also some statistics. You select the biobanks and the collections you want to continue with and proceed to the negotiator. So the main difference of the locator is it's actually a federated search, so the data is not collected anywhere central. It stays at the biobanks, wherein you file a search in the locator. The search is distributed to the biobanks. They process the data internally. It might take some time to do it. By default, I think the search has a 60 seconds timeout, but in principle, it can be even more than that, and you get the results back. The search is performed on individual data, so you can query any combination of parameters that you would like. And you get, as a result, you get the number of matching research participants, donors, patients, and you get the number of matching samples. And you get, of course, distribution across the biobanks. So how many cases, how many samples you have from each of the biobanks. And in order to get these detailed statistics, you need to log in and agree to the terms and conditions. This is because here we're basically producing anonymized data again as a result of the search. And we need to protect ourselves as the service provider for the residual risk. So the terms and conditions you are agreeing with here are basically only designed to avoid privacy attacks. So this is how the locator looks like. You have rather simple form. You can add different fields here. So you can go for the diagnosis, you can go for the material type, you can go for the biological sex, and a couple of other attributes that are part of the data model. And then you hit the send button. In order to get the detailed statistics, you need to hit the login button here first. And again, you're doing the same login procedure I've already shown for the negotiator. So this is the result. This is an example of search for C18.9, which is an unspecified location of the colorectal cancer or colon cancer. And you see that there are some biobanks that have, or there is actually one biobank, Lübeck, that has 10 cases and 30 samples. So you can check this, and it already gives you the hint that those biobanks that are checked here will be used in further negotiation in the negotiator, and hit the negotiate button down the screen. We have other findability services, as you have seen in the screenshot earlier with the negotiator. We have the German National Directory, which pushes also the data into the BBMRI-ERIC Directory. So basically, you get only a smaller subset of BBMRI Directory here working with the German directory. And you can also pull the RD Connect Biobank and Registry Finder. This is a tool developed in the past in RD Connect project, and it's intended entirely for the rare disease patients and rare disease researchers to match or to well, rare disease biobanks to provide the data to the researchers. And also there are also registries included. Registries are basically not biobanks. These are like dry biobanks. They typically have patient level data, but they have no samples. And they're collecting different types of patients as a kind of population throughout certain region typically. So how does the negotiation process work after you're done with the findability part? So in the first step, you're filing the request, and I'll do a demonstration of this. So you are, and I apologize here, there is actually a missing figure. So you're filing a title of the project description, the actual request description, and if you have any data or samples that are if you have any ethics vote that is suitable for accessing data or samples from any biobanks. This can simplify the access procedure because if you have some normal common ethics vote available, many biobanks, many European biobanks could accept the vote from the other European established ethical bodies. So the process is substantially faster than if the biobank has to go and ask their local authority. But it depends. Some will need to ask the local ethics approval anyway. What does this do is you get the structured data that comes from the findability service. So here you specified the available diagnosis, the material type, quality certifications, whatever. And go into the negotiator where you can specify any additional requests or requirements on the data, on the biological material using plain text. So you don't need to bother with I don't have a particular checkbox in the directory. You can just pre-select, identify those candidate biobanks, go into the negotiator, and there describe, well, I need the patients with certain genetic mutation only, and I need material to be collected according to specific procedure, and I need data in CDISC format as the output. You hit the negotiate button, it's sent to BBMRI-ERIC for a review. You go back, or if it's approved, it goes back to the state where the request proceeds to the biobanks. And this is where you start having the availability indicated. So this is the screen that you would get, kind of. So here I have a request that goes only to one data repository at Masaryk University, and you can see that they have indicated they're interested and they're checking status if the data for the particular request is available or not. You can use two types of communication in the negotiator. There is a request-wide discussion and the individual negotiation with biobanks collections. I mean, the whole communication within BBMRI negotiator is bound to the access policy, and that means all the requests have to be treated confidentially by the biobanks and must not be used for any other purpose than just assessing availability of the data and material. So we're already working in a rather safe environment, but still there might be some things, some discussions that the biobanks don't want to share with other biobanks. So this is the point of having individual negotiation with some biobanks or collection representatives. but in our experience, most of the exchange is actually done using the request-wide discussion, because many requests typically come underspecified. So this is how the biobanks say, or biobank representatives say, well, the request is underspecified. Can you please elucidate your analytical methods that you're going to use on the samples? And can you be please more specific about the data? And it's up to the user to refine the request. This is what I've already mentioned. So once this is done, the user selects with which collections and biobanks she wants to continue with. And the negotiator facilitates also the MTA signing process by allowing the biobanks and the requesters to exchange the MTA DTA. Again, in our experience, the DTA MTA template typically comes from the biobank. So if you are a researcher that is doing just some local study, or you are using a service of a single biobank eventually to get the data and samples out, the fastest way to get to the data and samples is to ask the biobank for the DTA MTA template. You check if it's okay for you. There might be some quick negotiation, and you sign it. You get the data and the samples. If you're building something bigger that spans many biobanks, like in BBMRI, we have done it with the CRC cohort. The point is that you don't want to have 30 different templates only because the data comes from 30 different biobanks. You need to have one cohort that is available under defined access conditions. So in such a case, it's you as a researcher proposing the DTA MTA template. But in such a case, I really recommend that you have some good lawyer at your hand at your home institution who can help you with negotiations of those contracts. As BBMRI, we can also help you with providing some DTA templates, for instance, but in principle, this is always a painful process because the institutional lawyers of the biobanks are typically used to some specific contract types, and they might inquire changes to the templates, and it takes some time. So it only makes sense to go through this route if you're building something that spans many biobanks and you need consistent MTA and DTA across those. The last step before you start implementing the project is the shipment tracking, which is just a simple notification where the biobanks indicates we have sent the data, we have sent the samples, and the requester indicates she has received the data or the samples. And at that point, it's concluded, and we, as BBMRI, are no longer involved until the project is over, and then the notification about the project and starts. I will stop the screen sharing for a moment and switch to the browser and show you quickly how the whole process looks in practice. So I will open a private window, and that's what I have just done, so that I am not authenticated to their services, and you see the process as a full. So share my screen. Can you see the screen again, Laura?
Yes, yes, we see.
Perfect. So let's start in the directory so that we simplify the whole process. For some reason it takes a little bit. Yes, so the directory is coming. Actually, I'm somewhat suspected the Zoom is really doing something nasty on the computer. So here you can search for those different things. The facets have already come. The data needed to load the page are still coming. And I just wonder, yeah, it's gradually getting there. So you can see you can search for any of those things I have mentioned earlier in my presentation. I will do a simple search here. So I will do C18, malignant neoplasms of colon. And you can see we have identified about 46 biobanks with more than 100 matching collections. And I can go, or I can specify, well, I'm actually interested in, let's say, well, frozen tissue and paraffin preserved tissue. So you can see that the number of biobanks have shrunk a little bit because now we are requesting biobanks that also have frozen and paraffin preserved material at the same time. They might not have the right combination still, but they at least indicated they have those material types. And I go to request samples. Now I'm transferred into the negotiator and I need to log in. And because I'm coming from BBMRI headquarters, I can use my identity at BBMRI. So BBMRI is my home institution. But in your case, you would be searching for some university, for instance. So yeah, let's wait for a bit. Yep, I will log in through my home institution. And now it takes me, the process takes me into the negotiator. And here you can see the request form that was missing on in the presentation. So here you can see that I'm using directory. I have the following search criteria and 66 collections were identified. And here I would fill in the title, the project description, request description, ethics vote, and you don't need to copy paste all of those things. You can actually, if you have a PDF with the project description, you can just upload it. So here you can select project description, request description, ethics vote, browse through your local computer, get the PDF typically out of your computer and upload it and submit the request. So that's about it. Are there any questions? I would like to thank you all for your attention, of course. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. Or if you want to see more of negotiator functionality.
So I have a question. For example, if I'm having some project and something and I'm looking for samples and I see that maybe there are not so many, and so my question actually is, how often is this collection updated? Like, could I return to this tool like after some 3 months and see maybe there's something new?
Yeah, so that is the case. Well, you can actually issue the request again, or you can ask if you have the request and it has not gone to satisfactory end, you can still put a request-wide communication, say, are there any updates? And biobanks that have not stepped away directly are still notified that there is still continuing interest from the researcher and they can check again, because the state might have ended on their end. But on the other hand, if you end up in a request where all the biobanks indicate they can't even collect it, I mean, that's also an option. Let me not submit the request, but I'll do one more search here. I will search for one collection that I am actually administering for some historical reasons. It's rare disease collection at Masaryk University, and it's only data collection, so no samples. So I search for it specifically. So I'll request samples. Well, this is not an ideal button, I admit. We're already discussing to rename it request access because you can get data out of it. So this is a test project. Whatever, I'll just put something in here as a garbage. Doesn't make any sense because I'll mark that it's a test request. This is important for that we're not spamming the biobanks if we're just doing this type of test. So I'll submit it. And then I mean, this is what you can see from the requester perspective. Now the request needs to be reviewed. So I will do it also because I have this admin right. So I quickly approve it. This is done by the BBMRI Access Manager normally. And I go to the my biobank and test request. This is kept out of the way for normal biobanks. They don't see the test requests in their main page because they would be annoyed. They get spammed. So here you can see, and I just need to move the Zoom window out a little bit. It's getting a bit slow again. What I wanted to show is why is the Zoom messing up the thing so bad? Yeah, participate in queries, sorry. And I can actually here, I can indicate that I'm interested in the first place. And then, once again, I can indicate that data is available, accessible, which is not the case for those rare collections, available, not accessible for given purpose, not available, but I can also indicate that samples data not available, but can be collected. So if there is a chance in my collection that something will change in the next month, I can state this and update the request so that the requester sees that, well, there is an option for upcoming collaboration by collecting something prospectively, that things have changed or might have changed, might change in months' time from now. So it's not answering the question directly, but the combination of those two things where biobanks can indicate that the material might be collected or the data might be collected for the given purpose, and the availability of the request-wide communication where you can poke the biobank in a month or in 3 months for the same request if something new is available. That should help you sort out this problem.
Okay, thank you. And I had so it's like an open request, so it can be.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what about this prioritizing of?
Well, that is something that is out of scope of BBMRI as such. This is the flexibility that is given by the statutes to the biobanks, that for the depletable material, it's up to them to decide if they give the material and the data for a particular purpose or if they don't.
And I had a question, like, for example, if I need to like validate some results or something, do you know from experience, like for validation?
Yes, this should be high priority. This
Okay.
should be a very high priority request, and well-behaved biobanks should keep some material for the validation purposes always in the collection. Of course, it can happen that even the validation material is depleted at the end because it is also requested for validation, but they should keep some material aside for these purposes.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe someone else has some questions.
I have a question. This is Rita, and also one comment. I start with the comment and then the question. This presentation, thank you very much, was very good and interesting from perspective of researcher. But I wanted to stress also the perspective of biobanks, as I know that also other biobanks, representatives from other biobanks of Latvia are present in this conference call. So I would like to extend actually to other biobanks in Latvia also to get involved in the directory. As I am representative also of national node, we can help you in this matter. So actually to get out there and show your biobank to the larger research audience, I wanted to stress this point out. And the next question, maybe for Petr, I know the answer, but maybe it's important for other participants. Is it for free, these services? Is it for Latvia for free? And that's from my part.
Yes. That's very simple. That is very simple answer. Yes, because all the members of BBMRI-ERIC have the directory service for free. The only thing you are paying for is your time to prepare the data for submission in the directory, and otherwise we're not charging you for anything. So please, we would like to welcome you on board of BBMRI-ERIC Directory and become registered in the Negotiator so that you can fully participate in the whole ecosystem of BBMRI-ERIC. And I somewhat apologize because I think the presentation was intended to be more for the researchers. So I have skipped that part of for the biobankers because we have another tutorial for them.
Okay, thank you. But I would shortly comment that actually importing data in the directory is quite easy. It's Excel page, Excel template, and we did this for our biobank. It's quite easy and quickly to do so. So I extend the invitation. That
is the advantage why we keep the directory, even if it's not operating on the sample or individual level, because it's really easy to have your biobank published in there. Typically, if you know the data model, the Latvian national node can help you with that for sure. If you know the data model, it takes 5 to 15 minutes.
Okay, if there are there are no other questions.
Thank you very much for your attention.